Welcome to Maps of Meaning, Episode 1. Yes, it's a complete play on Jordan Peterson's book Maps of Meaning, but this is Maps of Meaning. What the heck is it about? It's to try to figure out what the heck is going on in this crazy world. As you can see in the little doobly-doo below, we have certain comparisons. Why don't we understand each other? Well, this should make a lot of sense. Go back a little bit. Go back a couple of years, maybe even a year or so ago, because certain folks would hear Laural or Yani, or you'd see a particular dress. What color is the dress? As well as, I forgot the third thing there. Oops! That's alright, these things happen. But the sheer fact that very simple things that aren't even controversial, the color of a dress, we view it differently. Or even hearing things. Depending on how tired you are, apparently people would hear Laural, Yani, depending on the individual. Ah, yes, I actually remember the third thing. What was it? Oh, do you think in pictures or words? Because this is actually very interesting as well. Even a couple of years ago, I talked with my stepbrother, and he's like, I think in words. I'm like, oh, well, I kind of do both. I've asked a bunch of folks this. Some folks are like, well, maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If you just take these very basic things and you think about it for a second, you're like, oh, well, these are non-controversial things that just, we view the world differently. And if we view the world differently, as soon as you add in anything that's controversial at all, of course we're going to disagree over it. You look at certain videos, it's like, was this person being aggressive? Were they just brushing this intern or person working in the White House press room's arm away? Depending on what angle you're looking at, depending on who it is, you're getting two very different answers there. So the sheer fact that if we can't agree on certain very basic things, as soon as you get more complex, there's going to be a number of factors there. Your political affiliations, where are your biases there? What did you go through during your life? Were there particular instances that helped you form your brain, your just character, who you are at that particular point there? Because these are very complex times. And the sheer fact that we actually have the point now, we have the opportunity where we can actually start to get this metadata. Because my thing is, when something happens and somebody does something, it's like, I'm curious about these things. If all of a sudden, rather than just being like, well, you're an evil person, you did this, you did that, I'd ask them some questions. What color was the dress? When you hear this particular word, what do you hear? Are you hearing Laural? Are you hearing Yani? Just, how do you think? Like literally, how does your mind work as I start to become the dragon there? Because this is extremely important. We are at a precipice as my cat is starting to wake up and meow. HR bar. The thing is, if our minds work in different ways, if we have the ability to start getting this data, if we can actually start asking people these questions, we could start to correlate some of this data as well. We could actually see, well, what's going on here? Are there certain correlations? If people think in pictures, do they respond more of this way in a given situation? Because we already have like different personality groups and stuff like that. And that's kind of like a rough rubric scale. And it's like, all right, well, if you think in pictures, are you higher in conscientiousness? I don't know. And just seeing how these things correlate would actually start to explain some of this human condition. That's my opinion. I ain't a doctor. I ain't a psychologist. I ain't none of those fancy things. I literally lift things up and put them down all day, but I got plenty of time to think. So when I'm doing this thinking, these are the questions that come to mind. Why don't we understand each other? Why can't we come to some accords? And of course, there's going to be bias, there's going to be bluster, this, that, and the other thing. But if we have these very core basic things where things are supposed to be objective, if these objective things we already disagree on, no wonder we're going through what we are right now. So the sheer fact that we actually now have the ability to actually figure out how our brains work, what leads us to particular conclusions. Because Somebody may do or say something that I don't agree with at all, but the sheer fact that we actually have the ability to kind of try to figure these things out. And if we could actually see these different correlations about things that aren't so serious, maybe we can actually start to map them onto more serious things. We'll see different correlations. Okay, well, maybe this would explain why this particular person happens to be more conservative. Maybe that would explain why this person's a bit more liberal. These are things that we do have the opportunity to actually figure out why we're doing what we do. We just have such an immense opportunity because I was talking with some folks on Discord earlier about this. It's like literally, if we could clear the caches of hatred from our heads and hearts and actually buckle down and try to move forward as like a human species, we could be in freaking like Star Wars in like 1,000 years or something. But the issue with that is, well, it's not expedient. It's kind of like when folks started building cathedrals. They started building cathedrals. The people that would lay the foundation of those structures, they would not live to see its completion. Their kids often would not live to see its completion. But you know what? Their grandkids or their great grandkids might. And if we actually started thinking in those terms again, I'm pretty sure there's nothing that we couldn't accomplish. But we'd have to do what's hard and not what's expedient. And I think that makes all the difference there. But there's a real quick, poorly put out episode 1 of Maps of Memeing. We're going to do this as a continuous series. There's going to be a vice presidential debate coming up tomorrow, I believe. We'll cover some of that probably the following day. But we are in flux as a society right now. It could go extremely poorly. It could go extremely amazingly. We have the opportunity to literally level up. But I'll leave you all with that just out of expedience. I realize I'm a complete hypocrite. Shout out to my patrons, Joe Franco and Dave M. This broadcast is helped made possible by viewers like you. Thank you all for watching. Peace out, everybody. Be safe and long live.